going on, guys? It's your boy. Welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be doing a little review for the movie Inside Out 2. I'm incredibly excited about this movie. I had a really good time watching it in the theaters, and overall I really enjoyed this movie. I wasn't expecting it to potentially be better than the first movie because I think the original Inside Out movie is a really well done movie, but I'm going to go ahead and say this before I get too far into this review. I personally do think that this movie is better than the first Inside Out movie, which might be a hot take, but we'll talk about it. Let's talk about this.
Modern movie review.
So I am going to issue a bit of a spoiler warning. I'm not going to dive too far into spoilers now. I'll probably dive into them a little bit later in the video, but there is something that they do that in this movie that I think is really interesting that could potentially be seen as a plot twist, but at the same time, on paper, it's like, yeah, obviously this thing's going to happen, but overall, this movie is an incredible coming-of-age story in ways that I think that the first one kind of missed the mark a little bit on the coming-of-age side of things. I think that this one absolutely does it. I think that the way that they address puberty and the way that they address getting older and your mind kind of changing a little bit, the way that they kind of deal with, like, teenagers being, like, super receptive to certain things that happen and them kind of overreacting and over-emoting specific things and not really being able to control their emotions. They do a great job telling Riley's story in this movie and doing an excellent job just making her such a real character. And I want to say that overall, if nothing else from this movie, I think that overall the characterization of Riley in this movie is incredible. In my opinion, it is better than the original movie. And it does such an interesting job of switching from the emotions are 100% controlling her to she's in control of her own destiny. And the emotions just kind of step in whenever the emotions are needed, which I thought was an interesting touch. It was a great way to start this movie. And I think that overall, this movie really benefited from having that like sense of control and that sense of the fact that Riley is herself, right? She's not like, oh, emotion's the one who's mostly controlling her, so she's happy. She is Riley, and she's a culmination of all the emotions, which was really beautifully depicted in this movie. They did a really good job of bringing back some of those key elements from the first movie where it's like even the negative emotions have to be there for you to really balance yourself out and to be able to be human. And I think that it does just a brilliant job showcasing humanity and emotions and the way that your emotions help you perceive day-to-day activities and stuff like that. Really well done movie. I think that overall Inside Out might be one of the most unique animated movies I've seen in a really long time, and this movie I think encapsulates that energy incredibly well. And I think that's something in particular that these movies do very well compared to some of the other Pixar movies is the world building in this is absolutely incredible. Every single time that they go deeper and deeper into the mind and they go through, okay, here's where we keep all the memories, and here's, you know, where we have like this imagination station where people can go and draw and do a bunch of random things. They have pillow fights, and they have Mount Crushmore, which is absolutely hilarious. I'm gonna get into that later, but the humor of this movie, in my opinion, is also just absolutely excellent. I think that it starts off a little slow, but once you get into certain sequences, it gets significantly better. And overall, the humor in this movie is excellent. I think each of the main characters do a really good job, one portraying their archetype, but also blending well with the other emotions to kind of create like these weird friendships between the emotions that like at first it's kind of like, this is weird. Are these two relationships like are they like in love with each other? And then you just kind of realize that it's kind of like certain emotions kind of go hand in hand, and I think that that's what they're setting up in this movie really well, is like fear and anxiety. Some people would argue that anxiety comes from fear, or fear is a part of anxiety and stuff like that, and the way that they kind of like have connections there works really well. Same thing with like sadness and embarrassment. They have a little thing going on with that, and once again, I just think that it does just such an excellent job of kind of pairing certain emotions together and having it be shown that like having mixed emotions is really important. You're not supposed to just have happy all the time or sad all the time, and it's great. I really like this movie. I think that it's a very important movie to potentially show your kids if you are a parent. I think that this is something that's going to resonate with people a lot as they grow up, and they're going to kind of realize, yeah, I think that during, you know, this stage of my life when I was going through puberty and I was doing the big transition from middle school to high school, you go through such a brush of emotions and you go through so much like new changes that you're not used to experiencing, and it feels like a lot and it's very overwhelming. And I think that the posters for this movie really did a great job of showcasing the fact that this movie was going to have a bunch of emotions in a really small amount of space, and it was going to be overcrowded, it was going to be overwhelming, and there was going to be a lot happening. And the way that they balance it in this movie is phenomenal. Like, I think that they visualize the inside of a teenage mind incredibly well. There's a lot going on, there's way too much to kind of focus on, there's way too much happening, and then anxiety kind of overtakes a lot of the other emotions because in some ways more than others, it's hard to control specific things when all you're worried about is what if this happens, what if that happens, what if this happens. And the way that they kind of showcase anxiety taking over everything, and then the other emotions having to kind of like step forward, and you kind of having to face your fears a little bit with that, was really well done. They do something in animated movies that I love so much, and this is gonna sound weird, but oh my god, they have a sequence where she kind of has like a little bit of an anxiety attack, and the way that they visualize it is so perfect. It literally is like, anybody who's ever had an anxiety attack, you will feel so seen in that moment, because she's hyperventilating, she's panicking. The way that they are animating like specific, like they'll like zoom in on her like cleats or whatever, or her ice skates, not cleats, sorry, wrong sport. But they'll like zoom in on specific parts of like her body and like her hair and like how it's a mess, and then she'll zoom in on this, and then they'll zoom in on that, and then like the way that they're just kind of going all over the place, and then it cuts into the mind, and then anxiety is once again all over the place, and it's just like there's so much happening, and it's too hard for her young mind to process it. So she's hyperventilating, she's having an anxiety attack, she's not doing really well, and it's so interesting. And I really, really liked that. I thought that entire sequence was beautiful, and I think that they portrayed an anxiety attack incredibly well. One of my favorite animated movies of the last 10 years, in my opinion, has to be Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, and that's another movie that did it incredibly well. And so just being able to see that representation on the screen is so satisfying. And for this to be in a kids movie that is kind of like teaching kids, you know, this is a cautionary tale. Don't let anxiety get the best of you. Always kind of like think through what you're going to do. And it's great. I really, really like that. But overall, that was some of the main things I wanted to touch on. I don't think I gave any huge spoilers there, but now I'm going to kind of dive into some of the bigger spoilers, because what they did with this movie was really, really smart. And it caught me off guard. And after like sitting through it, I was just like, obviously this was gonna happen. How did I not know this was gonna happen? But I want to talk about the return to having villains in Pixar movies. I don't know if this is like a big thing that other people notice, but a lot of animated movies, especially on the Disney side of things recently, have kind of been straying away from having villains, and instead they've had like certain ideologies that they need to overcome or whatever throughout the movies. And it kind of, for the first time in a really long time, felt like they had a villain in a Pixar movie, because I think what movie was it? Incredibles 2 obviously had a villain, because that's a superhero movie, but like with the exception of that, there's been like so much, like Frozen 2 didn't have a villain, Encanto technically didn't really have a villain. What's it called? Wish did have a villain. That was a bad example. Wish definitely had a villain. But Elemental, once again, didn't really have a villain. It was just her kind of having to overcome her anxiety and stuff like that. So it's like, overall, there's been so many movies recently that didn't really have a villain, and to have one in this movie and it be anxiety, and it shows how anxiety can be really, really toxic if you let it get the best of you, was great. And the way that they personified anxiety was fantastic, and the way that they showed like anxiety sometimes can help push you into good situations, because there were multiple times where anxiety took the wheel, and it's like, okay, now she's talking to somebody who she otherwise wouldn't be talking to, and yeah, she's a little bit nervous, but everything's fine, everything's cool, the other person's reacting well to it, everything's okay, right? But then also anxiety is like looking at future outcomes, and it's like, there's this thing that could potentially happen that could be good, but then there's also this other thing that's going to happen, and it's going to be really bad, so we can't do that, we have to do this. And I think that originally when anxiety shows up, it's very interesting how she's like so quick to be like, this is what we need to do, this is what we need to do, this is what we need to do. And I just thought that she was an incredible villain in this movie. And obviously a lot of people are going to be like, she's not really a villain, she's kind of a protagonist, and then she like solves certain problems or whatever. She's mostly a villain in this movie. I think that they do a really good job showcasing how anxiety can plague a young mind a little bit, because the way that she literally takes over everything, it's hard to say that that's not a villain, you know? But that being said, I do really enjoy the fact that by the end of the movie, they kind of have this moment where there is a parallel between anxiety and happiness, and you kind of realize anxiety is taking over everything. Anxiety wants to be like the main emotion. Anxiety wants to kind of like push Riley to be a certain way, and she's always kind of controlling the emotions and only letting Riley experience good emotions and stuff like that. And they showcase how similar she is to Happiness, who's essentially been doing the same exact thing. Happiness is like, her core memories are all going to be happy memories, and then she's always going to have, you know, her what was the phrase that they used? It's kind of like your belief system or something like that. You put in certain core memories, and then it creates your beliefs, and then that's how Riley becomes the person that Riley is. And Happiness throughout the movie is constantly just putting like happy memories down there, so that, you know, Riley's belief system becomes her being a good person and her only being, you know, a good friend and potentially doing whatever is in the best interest of her and the people around her, as opposed to like, okay, well, every once in a while bad things are going to happen and you need to be okay and you need to be willing to face those bad things head on. And I think that they do just such an excellent job showcasing how happiness has been controlling the entire time and now anxiety is controlling, and all of a sudden anxiety is the bad person, but happiness has been doing it the entire time. And why is it okay that happiness is doing it? And it kind of helps them both realize they're both in the wrong. They both need to help each other out and they can coexist and they should coexist, which was fantastic. Really loved that. But yeah, overall, I've touched a lot on the beginning of the movie and I've touched a lot on the end of the movie. To talk about the middle of the movie, it is so incredibly funny. Once again, we go through a journey into the mind. Instead of it just being sadness and joy who are going around and exploring the depths of Riley's mind, it's actually all 5 of the main emotions go on a little adventure. And they have a lot of heart-to-heart moments, which I wasn't really expecting. There's a moment where Happiness has an emotional breakdown and she completely like goes off the rails a little bit and is talking about how tough it is being around a bunch of negative emotions all the time and how it's so hard to stay positive when sometimes it's really hard to be positive. And then Anger steps up and kind of gives her a little bit of a motivational pep talk, which I thought was great. I thought that was fantastic. That entire sequence actually cheered me up a little bit. And I really loved that. I thought that was great. Once again, we get to explore different animation styles, which is one of my favorite things about the first movie, is they'll have sequences where they're going into the 2nd dimension or 4th dimension or whatever, and then they're showing like 2D cartoon versions of them. And they had similar stuff like that. Like I'd mentioned earlier, they went to what I called the Imagination Station. I don't remember what it's actually called, but just like a bunch of different places where like they can experience different things. They went to where the deepest, darkest secrets are kept, and then they saw some of Riley's secrets, like her secret crush on a video game character, which was the funniest side character in a movie like ever, and I absolutely loved that. I thought that was fantastic. So overall, I really enjoyed that. I thought that was great, and I definitely enjoyed that. But that being said, I just thought that this movie was great. I thought that the journey was fantastic. I thought that all of the emotions, kind of showcasing emotions that weren't just their own, were great. Embarrassment, low-key MVP of the movie. I'm not gonna lie, he was fantastic. But yeah, I think that that's all I'm going to go ahead and touch on. I thought that this movie was fantastic. I really enjoyed it. I hope that you guys go out and check it out as well, because it was a whole lot of fun. And Pixar, once again, showcasing why Pixar is as great as they are. In my opinion, Pixar has never made a bad movie. I think that Lightyear is okay, but other than that, all of their movies are great. But yeah, that being said, if I had to give this movie a rating on my scale of 1 to 100, I give this movie a solid 89. I think that it's really, really good. There are a lot of moments that kind of feel rushed throughout the story, and I definitely think that there are parts of it where we're staying away from Riley for really, really long periods of time, and we're just focusing on the emotions. And considering at the end of the day, this is Riley's story, I would have liked to see a little bit more with the Riley character. But overall, I thought that this was great. I thought it had incredible world building. Everything inside the mind was fantastic. And yeah, but that being said, that was it for this video, guys. Thank you guys so much for coming by and checking it out. I love and appreciate you guys so much for watching. And if you liked it, feel free to like and subscribe, and I'll hopefully see you guys in the next one. Peace out. Bow, bow, bow.
Back at it again, but that's a relevant flow. So smooth, they calling me Mr. Elegant. Like an elephant, I got a long nose. Like a president, I've got a few hoes. Swift with a stutter, I'm smooth like butter. Don't see it coming when I slip undercover. Like a big dog, but I don't bite. I'm still a big broad, I'd win that fight. Come match you and I knock out your lights.